Hi, everyone. My name is Adriana Corona, and I am Product Director for Purple AI at SentinelOne. And we just want to thank you all for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about new GenAI innovations. And we'll also get into an honest discussion between Alex and Eli on the practical implications of emerging AI in cybersecurity. So as you may know, yesterday we announced the global launch of Purple AI, which is SentinelOne's AI security analyst. So we will also give an in-depth review of Purple in this session, and that's also going to include an expert demo. We're going to save some time for Q&A at the end, so just please enter all of your questions into the chat because that's going to help us look through them, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of the session. Thank you all for coming. Before we get started, I just want to introduce you to your speakers for today, Alex Stamos, Ely Kahn, and Shane Harsh. Alex is the Chief Trust Officer at SentinelOne and a lecturer in computer science and international policy at Stanford University. He was a co-founder of Krebs and Stamos Group and ISEC Partners. And he also served as the CISO of Facebook and Yahoo. Ely Kahn is the VP of Product for AI, Cloud Security, and Core Platform at SentinelOne. Previously, he was head of product at AWS Security Hub and was co-founder of the security analytics startup Squirrel, which was acquired by AWS as now Amazon Detective. Eli has also served in a variety of positions in the federal government, including Director of Cybersecurity at the National Security Council in the White House. And Shane Harsh is a principal solution engineer here at SentinelOne with a degree in AI, over 25 years in cybersecurity, and serves as a SAN certified instructor for cyber defense. So, all right, now let's just dive into this webinar. And I'm going to start with some questions for Alex. So Alex, you do a lot of work with boards of major companies, advising them on cybersecurity risks. What cyber risks are usually at the top of security registers?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Thanks for joining us. So, when we talk about risk, we can talk about the risk that companies have from their infrastructure, and then we can also talk about threat actors. For the vast majority of companies, the threat actors they really have to worry about are financially motivated. They are the cyber extortion actors. I try not to say ransomware anymore because these guys do a lot more than traditional ransomware. They're financially motivated actors who will break in, steal data, perhaps lock up your systems with ransomware or delete it after stealing it, and then will use a variety of means to put pressure on companies to pay. The suite of companies that are possibly vulnerable to this, that are targeted by these companies, is effectively anybody who has computers and money, which is everybody, right? Now, depending on your size and your industry, you might attract different kind of actors. And one thing's, our company recently put out a report called the Watchtower Report, which is based upon the observations of our MDR and our intelligence teams. And there's a Gartner chart in there, effectively, of the activity by different ransomware actors and who's doing the best, who has the most attacks and the largest ransoms. And what we're finding is that the really good ransomware actors in the top right corner, I think Gartner would call that like the leaders corner or innovators, they're pulling away from the rest. And it's because that group of 7, 8, 9 group ransomware teams have gotten really good at division of labor. So they've built affiliate networks where people do really specialized jobs, just doing R&D, just doing malware development, just doing negotiations, just doing east-west movement. But they're also collecting a ridiculous amount of money in the hundreds of millions, and some estimate perhaps in the low billions of dollars per year. And a bunch of that money gets put back into R&D. And just like any other company, there's a virtuous cycle here for them of being really successful in making money and then be able to develop their teams. So the top threat actor for most companies should be in that area. For a number of companies, though, they are also worried about state-sponsored actors who do not have financial constraints. That's especially companies that either deal with intellectual property that is very interesting to specific countries, especially the People's Republic of China. So if you're in pharma, if you're in anywhere in the semiconductor supply chain, if you're in green tech or anywhere in the supply chain, if you're in AI or anywhere in the supply chain, then you are facing an organized team who shows up every single day, gets their cup of culturally specific caffeinated beverage, and will spend all day trying to break into your company. The other thing we're seeing out both China and Russia is the potential for disruptive attacks. And we've seen a shift over the last couple of years of PRC doctrine to not just be about intellectual property, but also to build backdoors into American companies that are critical for infrastructure, especially in the Pacific, in Guam, San Diego, Seattle. And that's quite scary. And it's a very specific set of companies. But if you happen to be related to rail or power or water or any kind of infrastructure on the West Coast of the United States, that's another set of concerns that you have to have.
Cool. Yeah, maybe just to chime in there, just to riff on those thoughts for a second. One of the questions that I often get asked is about ransomware as it relates to cloud security. I think sometimes there's this misperception that ransomware is not a problem in the cloud. And my experience working closely with the AWS customer incident response team, it's actually one of the primary incident vectors, at least in terms of significant incidents. Obviously, there's lots of high volume things like cryptojacking, but the things that customers are really concerned about is ransomware also in the cloud. It's a little bit different, right? You're a little bit less worried about virtual machines getting encrypted because you can easily spin those back up from a pristine image. But because people are putting more and more sensitive data in the cloud, in databases and cloud storage, those are the things that are getting encrypted and or exfiltrated in cloud. So it's pervasive. It's not just an on-prem threat as well. Adrian, are you back?
I'm back. Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, and we also recently saw that major miss with the XE utilities compromise. So, Alex, as a former CISO, how do you think organizations can best defend against those types of threats?
Okay, so the XE compromise, if you guys haven't read up on it, this is the most fascinating thing to happen in our field in at least the last 5 years, right? It's the most interesting thing, I think, since the SolarWinds breach, perhaps, of indicating what a high-end attacker can do. So just a quick recap for those who have been following it. There's a library, a compression library that's pretty widely used called XZ, that's used in a variety of open source projects. And effectively, somebody created a bunch of fake personas, spent almost 2 years inserting themselves into open source projects, created different personas to say, I think this person's great. I think you should take their plugin. So you have the core persona, and then you have a bunch of fake personas that are trying to manipulate the maintainers of this project. Eventually, they got the maintainership of this important library swung over from a volunteer to this fake persona. And then the fake persona put in a bunch of very advanced, highly obfuscated backdoors that could possibly be used in a variety of situations, but looks to be specifically targeted at OpenSSH. So OpenSSH is one of the most audited, most carefully maintained open source packages, as it should be. Effectively, almost every Linux device in the world and a ton of Mac OS devices and other kinds of Unixes run OpenSSH. And so people really pay attention to it. But what people weren't paying attention to is all the libraries it pulls in. And so they were able to get this backdoor to go upstream for some weird reasons. Like the timing was constrained by another change that was being made elsewhere in the code base. And so they kind of rushed it out. And in rushing it out, they caused a performance regression that was noticed by an incredibly observant maintainer of the Postgres database, a totally different product, who then sound the alarm. And what we've seen for the last week is a concerted effort by a large number of people to reverse engineer all this. Okay, this is terrifying. We got super, super lucky, like as a world, that this one developer was really bored and looking at his Valgrind output and was willing to go look into why he had this performance regression. Nobody else caught it. This had been in the library for a while. It had not made it really into production operating systems, but it made it into pre-release operating systems. And if it had not been caught, there are tens, probably hundreds of millions of Linux devices when you think about all the virtual machines, all the cloud providers, all the hyperscalers, and then every embedded Linux system. Eventually, this would have been a master key that allows you to get anything. So who was it? Well, a couple of hints here. One, this was somebody who does not have to make money in the short term. This was a long, long play. And we have seen supply chain attacks against open source from people who are stealing Bitcoin, but none of those have been anywhere as long and professionally managed as this one. So I think it is likely a state actor. The time zones hint towards Asia. And so immediately we turn to the People's Republic of China as a potential source of this. The other interesting thing is it's a no-bus backdoor, a nobody but us backdoor. So this wasn't just, they could have made it much simpler if it was just a bug that anybody could exploit, but you have to have a specific private key to exploit this. And so that also hints it to being a backdoor made by a state actor, because any country would also be concerned. Like if you're a ransomware actor, you don't really care. You're not writing your own infrastructure. But if you're the People's Republic of China or the United States of America, which the US has done backdoors, the backdoors the US has put into products have always been no-bus backdoors that only the US can exploit. And you saw the same thing here. I find this terrifying because the odds that there's a professional team sitting in Beijing just doing this work, that they would only go after one open source library, is effectively zero, right? And we got super duper lucky. So what do we do? Okay, so if you're a company that spends a lot of time working on open source, supporting open source, using open source, then we are going to have a concerted effort to, one, uplift the standards of what is required of verification of people before they become committers or owners of these projects. That's kind of a cultural thing that's going to have to shift. And if you're like a Microsoft, Meta, Google, Amazon, if you're like a $1 trillion company that has based your entire industry on open source, then you're going to have to spend money to go look into this. If you're anybody else, there's not much you can do other than try to catch the use of these backdoors downstream of the backdoor. Catching the backdoor itself, extremely hard. We got very lucky here, and there's going to have to be a concerted effort to do that, but most companies do not have to participate in that. What most companies can do is, after somebody exploits a backdoor, all of a sudden you've got OpenSSH opening up a shell, and there's a guy on the machine, and they're doing things. They're doing east-west movement. They're accessing stuff they shouldn't. Maybe they're logged into a machine that's never logged into from an interactive shell. Those are the kinds of things that you need to be gathering up all your logs, all of your data. You need to have EDR agents everywhere, and it all needs to be going into one big data lake so that you can be watching and you can be alerting on that. You can't catch the backdoor, but you can catch everything that's downstream of the backdoor, and the existence of the backdoor by itself isn't enough for the attackers. They have to do something with it. So the hope would be that would, if you have the proper monitoring, you can catch the downstream use and then back up to, why the hell did OpenSSH open up this unauthorized shell, right? And then you can ring the alarm and a bunch of people can help you.
Thanks. And I know that you're also an expert in trust and safety. You had recently testified at the DHS about securing AI. And I know we're going to talk today a lot about AI and GenAI and its uses. So can you give us some insights into what companies, and especially those companies that provide AI solutions, what do they need to do to maintain trust and privacy?
Yeah, this is a fascinating field, and it's interesting that we talk about trust and safety. So I testified in House Homeland Security about AI security, and I teach a class at Stanford. We're in the second week of our trust and safety class. And the thing I tell my students, the difference between trust and safety and traditional cybersecurity or information security, is that security is about making a system violate its technical limits, of making a system do something it's not supposed to do. Trust and safety is about people using products in a technically correct way that ends up with somebody being harmed. And that's the fascinating thing about the AI discussion, is there are AI security problems where you can manipulate AI to do bad things. But a much broader set of issues is AI doing what it's supposed to do, and then something bad happens. And this is the alignment problem of how do you train AI to do the things that you actually want it to do without having weird incentive structures. The old sci-fi example is the paperclip maximizer, that you build AI that wants to build paperclips, and it turns all humans and the entire Earth into paperclips, right? That you want to avoid those kinds of incentive structures. So that's the alignment problem. But then all these other issues that have to deal with intellectual property, that have to deal with bias, that have to deal with whether or not a system should be trustworthy to do important things. what do you do about it? Okay, so this is actually going to be an entire field. It is the super early days. So if anybody tells you I can solve these problems for you, they are lying, right? They are lying to you. Because from my perspective, the AI safety and security field is where we were in cyber in the 90s when I was a young guy doing things for which the statute of limitations has run out. It was a super exciting time to be in security because somebody would go to DEF CON and do a talk and be like, here's a new way to hack web apps. And every single web app that existed would be vulnerable to that hack because nobody had ever heard of that entire class of issues, right? Like cross-site request forgery, every single website was vulnerable to CSRF because nobody had ever heard of it before, right? Or printf vulnerabilities. Like these are huge things. That's where we are in AI, where somebody can go and do a Usenix or Black Hat talk, and it's going to completely revolutionize how everybody has to do anything. So the important thing is to be flexible, is to understand we are in the early stages of this, and you cannot provide yourself or your company with any reasonable level of confidence that you guys are doing things right. And so you have to build kind of a risk matrix out with the understanding that a lot of these things haven't been decided. A lot of the legal issues are very much up in the air. It's not my area, but I'm friends with a bunch of lawyers and law professors who work in this space. It's super confusing of what the legal issues are going to be. So you just have to have kind of a real flexible framework here. And you have to be realistic about telling the business that you work for, hey, I can't give you any guarantees. So when you turn up this AI thing, sure, have it do some customer service stuff. Sure, have it do a couple of fun things. Do not let it do air traffic control. Do not let it screen resumes of whether or not you're going to interview people. Do not let it drive cars yet, right? Like we're just way too early to allow AI without a human in the loop to be doing incredibly dangerous things, both because of its safety and alignment issues, but also we don't know the ways that people can maliciously manipulate it to cause harm.
Maybe just a quick follow-up for both you and Eli. How do you think that that AI is going to change the attacker-defender landscape? Has it started changing the landscape already?
Alex, why don't you go first?
Oh, okay. So I think AI, for all the discussion, AI has been net positive so far for defenders, partially because companies like ours have been spending hundreds of millions of dollars doing research, and the attackers haven't been doing that for years and years. The other cool benefit of AI is, for all this discussion of AI replacing people, and it is going to replace a bunch of jobs, but the jobs it replaces are really going to empower people who are then driving the AI. I see AI as mostly a force multiplier that, if you're a law partner, instead of having 10 associates do discovery for you, you have 2 associates because they're able to use AI to read the stuff real fast. And if you're a SOC analyst, instead of having 5 SOC analysts do lots of manual queries, a SOC analyst is going to be able to do a natural language query that is, instead of it taking them 2 hours to figure it out, they do in 30 seconds, and they're able to get answers much more quickly. And so from that perspective, I think AI has so far, and will continue to be for quite a while, a net positive, because it allows, the biggest problem we have in cyber is the lack of talent and not enough people doing this work. And so the fact that it is a massive force multiplier is great. It will turn more negative. I mean, people are using it for, generating phishing emails and stuff, and that's fine, whatever. It will make social engineering in other languages other than your native language a lot easier. It's going to make disinformation and that kind of stuff much easier. My real fear is eventually you will see AI that is trained on kind of structured instructions on how to break into a computer. And then when we have like AI exploit code generation, AI vulnerability discovery, and especially AI-powered malware, where the malware is much smarter than Stuxnet, and it has Stuxnet-like capabilities, but it can operate in any network that for which you do not have intelligence, like we had for Stuxnet. That allegedly had. Sorry, Eli. Apologies to anybody, including myself, with the security clearance on the phone. That's my real fear, is that you could build a Stuxnet-like model that is trained on ways that you do intrusions in the networks, and that Stuxnet malware can, once it's in the network, can make an intelligent decision of how to act without a C2 channel. And so what we're really ending up is 5 years from now, I think most of the high-end attack and defense is all going to be automated. It's going to be computers hacking systems and then computers watching and stopping it. And on both sides, you'll have humans supervising and giving guidance to the computers. But this stuff will be happening so fast that it'll be AI versus AI.
Maybe to transition a little bit to Purple, which I know folks are excited to hear more about. I think from our perspective, the Purple team, AI is definitely benefiting the defense more than the offense. And maybe just to back up for a sec, what is AI? This is one of those terms that can mean a lot of different things. AI as a concept has been around for decades. Sentinel-1 has been using AI for the last 10 years. One of our initial innovations was using supervised machine learning, which is one branch of AI, to automatically detect files as malware without using signatures. And really, Sentinel-1 disrupted the antivirus industry using what we now call our static AI engine, which has been trained on 500 million malware samples to automatically recognize whether a file is malware or not based on various characteristics of that file. But what's new now is really generative AI and foundation models that power generative AI. And so, whereas historically our usage of supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning has been used to power better, more accurate detections, threat detections specifically. Generative AI is really an analyst productivity tool. And it has the potential to fundamentally reshape security operations and security operations centers by allowing folks to save time on the most time-intensive tasks, like doing threat investigations and hunting, and reallocate that time to higher value activities. Adriana, should we dig into Purple a little bit more?
Yeah, so you're talking about how we're up-leveling analysts. I'm just wondering, how exactly do we make them more efficient?
Yeah. So Purple's initial use case, and we've got a big long roadmap as a customer. We're happy to share this with you. But Purple's initial focus is around simplifying and streamlining threat investigations and threat hunting. And we do that via a number of core capabilities. One core capability is translation, natural language translation specifically. And by that, what I mean is you can ask a question in conversational English, and Purple will automatically translate that question to a Power Query. And we can go in a little bit later into some details about how we do that. But we also support summarization. And so we summarize the results of a query. So if you get back 100 log lines from a query, we'll distill that down to a nice 3-paragraph summary. We also summarize individual events and indicators. So if you drill down to an individual behavioral indicator in our data lake, we'll actually provide a nice 2-paragraph summary of that indicator. And from our beta testing, what we saw is that customers are taking these summaries and just cutting and pasting them into tickets. They're quite good. And then the third piece, the third major pillar of our Purple AI initial sets of capabilities is around next best suggestions. So, as an analyst, hunting and investigation is difficult because one, I need to be a pretty good query creator. I need to understand the query language at an expert level. Two, I need to understand the threats and threat intelligence so that I can craft good queries. And that third capability that Purple has is it actually suggests the next best query based on all of the context of the previous questions you've asked, the results from those previous questions, and will dynamically generate, okay, based on what I've returned to you so far, here's the next best query. So it really guides an analyst through that investigation or hunting process through natural language translation, summarization, and next best suggestions.
Yeah, so I know we're actually going to have a pretty detailed demo of this as well from Shane later on. So I kind of wanted to ask you a follow-up of something that might not be obvious from a demo either. And that follow-up is about our integrated platform and data lake. So can you talk a little bit about why it's important that Purple AI is built on our performant data lake and supports OCSF formatted logs?
Yeah. So SentinelOne, about 2 or 3 years ago, we acquired a modern data lake capability. It was originally called Scalar, built by the folks that created Google Docs. Separates in a modern architecture, separates compute and storage, and it's now fully and seamlessly integrated into our platform as our Singularity data lake. Purple sits on top of it, and it allows you to query data faster as part of a hunter investigation. Now, because the Singularity data lake has these great performance characteristics, like if you compared it to, look, I hate throwing other vendors' names out there, but if you compare it to like a Splunk, for any type of query that you measure, whether it's sort of small data or big data, Purple is 5 to 10 times faster and less expensive. So we've got these really nice natural advantages around our data lake, and because Purple is built on top of the data lake, those advantages confer to Purple. But it's not just about speed and performance; it's also about efficacy, right? There's lots of noise out there about generative AI, lots of marketing hype, but ultimately it comes down to how accurate are the results? Like, how good are we at translating a natural language command into Power Query? And we've done a bunch of testing on this. We beta tested Purple for 4 months with hundreds of not only like our internal SOC and internal hunters, but also 100 customers. And but we also did some really interesting capture the flag challenges. And one that we really like to talk about is this idea of man versus the machine. And so with man versus the machine, we pitted our very best Power Query expert against 6 other more mid-tier security and solution architects. And so this was a multi-hour capture the flag contest. Now the mid-tier folks, the 6 mid-tier folks, they had access to Purple. So they could do the capture the flag contest with Purple enabled. Our most senior solution architect just did it writing Power Queries the old-fashioned way. All 6 of the folks with access to Purple completed the capture the flag contest faster than our most senior expert. This was a great sort of anecdotal test. So then we decided to expand this across our larger beta customer population, and we collected a bunch of statistics from them. And what those stats showed us is that out of those 100 customers, what they said uniformly or on average across all of them is that Purple enabled them to hunt 80% faster and 128% easier versus just writing Power Queries. We actually tested this, with we gave them the Power Queries to write, and then we gave them Purple access and saw which one was faster. So we have real data here. One of the other interesting things that we collected, and that's part of the Purple launch, which you'll see in the demo, is this idea of notebooks. So Purple is not just a chatbot, right? And I've seen this with some competitor products where it's almost like a modern day version of Clippy. some applications of generative AI where you have like this chatbot that sort of floats along with you in the console. You can ask questions, but it's all very ephemeral. With Purple, we built it around this idea of notebooks. So as you start a conversation, aka a hunt or an investigation with Purple, we save that set of queries and results in a notebook so it can become a more permanent artifact that it can be inserted into your security operations workflows. This is really important. This is a key differentiated feature for us that we haven't seen with others. And ultimately, this allows Purple's benefits to accrue not just to individuals, but to entire teams. Because you have these notebooks that you can share with others in the console, you can actually use them to educate other team members about what a successful hunter investigation looks like. So there's this compounding effect around Purple usage. People that are using it become smarter and better analysts because they're actually seeing how Purple does these translations because we show its work. But then the whole team gets better because it has these notebook artifacts that it can refer back to.
And going back to how practitioners might use this, Alex, what are your thoughts on the benefits to practitioners for the features that Eli just mentioned for Purple?
Yeah, so like I was talking about before, the truth is any modern company of reasonable size and reasonable threat model, which is becoming almost everybody because of the growth of the commercial actors, you can't plan to prevent intrusion, right? Like saying we're going to keep the bad guys completely out of our network, it's just not practical, right? You've got too many people that can make mistakes. You've got too many systems to manage. You're going to have too much shadow IT. An attacker will always be able to get a foothold in your network. What's going to change with systems like Purple AI is that if you do your job right, you've got EDR everywhere, and you have all your logs coming in. You've got everything coming into your data lake. The benefit is going to be it is much easier for a fixed set of SOC analysts, which for everybody, I've yet to meet a CISO who's like, man, I've got way too much headcount, right? Like even if you have support from your company, you've got money, you've got the authorized headcount, the odds that you're able to hire people who are as good as you want are quite low. And so the ability to utilize the fixed number of SOC analysts and responders and investigators across your entire network and to make them really efficient in clearing out cases is going to be the key innovation here and the key benefit to CISOs, which is what you've got to do. Like you've effectively, what I've been telling people is like, if you're not dealing with 10, 15 false positives a day, you're probably not looking closely enough, right? Because like if you've got 10,000 employees, there should be 20 weird things that happen every day at your company that turn out not to be malicious, but just this guy lost something, this person was traveling, somebody was trying to log in, where they shouldn't, somebody accessed something they shouldn't. And if you're going to do that, then if you're going to have that level of sensitivity, having the ability for analysts to go make a query, look and say like, oh yeah, no, this guy's just on vacation, it's fine, is really key. And so you want that to take 5 minutes, not take 2 hours, because people have to go find their logs and write complicated queries, and the query doesn't return correctly and all this kind of stuff. And so I think the creation of efficiency changes the level of sensitivity that you can have on your network, and really has, like, we've had this real problem in the security industry. We've gotten really good at creating data. We haven't been that good until now of analyzing that data. And so it helps balance out the fact that the fire hose of a modern organization that is paying for Sentinel-1 for their EDR, is getting all their logs, is pulling everything off their Palo Altos, that if you're doing that all correctly, you're getting this fire hose that you now have the ability actually to deal with.
I'm actually super excited to see the demo now that Shane's going to show us. And what we see on our screen now is the result of the months of research that we did with our beta participants. And Eli already mentioned the feature set that was really compelling for customers. So they said it was 80% faster threat hunting with Purple than without Purple, and 128% easier threat hunting. So I think, Alex, that really supports what you're talking about, how teams will operate in the future with tools like Purple. One of the most popular features was also the one Eli mentioned, the notebooks. So with that, I think we're all excited to see Shane give us a live demonstration of Purple, so you can see these in action and see how it can actually make your SOC teams faster.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Let's go ahead and dive in. So first, what I'm going to show you is just the general console for Purple AI. A couple of things around the logistics of it. You access it through our data lake. It's essentially an overlay on the data lake to allow you to interact with that that data that's funneling in, whether it's your endpoint telemetry or in our future support for any other data coming in, and having Purple AI be able to recognize all of that normalized data that we are ingesting. So we start here with the Purple AI landing page. What you're going to see off to the left is you're going to see all of the notebooks that we were talking about, the ability to share those notebooks with other people on your team. What's nice about the notebook is it is essentially a recording of your interaction with the AI. And that's really important. When you come back, if you want to pull up a session that you already went through, you've got all the data and the analysis that was run. You can then share that notebook. You can rename that notebook. But I'm going to go back to the new notebook. Secondarily, we also want to provide you some guidance on the types of things that you can ask for. So, for instance, if you're going to go look for particular TTPs, well, we've got some examples of that just to give folks an example structure of how you might build your query. But also remember that this is all natural language, right? We're not building anything here that's terribly complicated. Get event counts for Linux machines grouped by the hour of the day, right? These are all natural language queries that we would make, the types of things that security analysts in general should know, even if they're not familiar with the specific technology underlying Sentinel-1. And so this is what we're talking about when we talk about enable the analyst to work faster and easier, to be that force multiplier, that they don't have to stumble around. So one of the things that I'm going to do, I'm just going to start with a simple query here. Show me the machines with the most failed logins. So, here I'm looking for either brute force attempts or password spraying or thing like that. I want to identify those machines that have been targeted the most. And so I get my report back here and I can easily see the summary. But what we also see is the translation from this natural language into our query language, and taking advantage of some of the statistical capabilities that are built into that query language, including a simple thing here, limit 1,000, right? We recognize many of our customers are pulling in terabytes of data per day. And so, and it could be from a single, from a single environment. So we recognize there's a large volume of data that we can go through. So one of the things that we built into the Purple AI is an assumption of, well, let's just look at the first 1,000 results. Now, anyone that's done any kind of data science or data analytics understands that this might or might not be a significant sample size, but it at least gives you a sense of what that data looks like so that you can validate, oh yeah, this is what I'm expecting to see. And most importantly, we have sorted it by the most failed login. So in general, I would assume that the answers that we're going to want to see are really even in the top 5. And we could have worded it that way. Show me the top 5 endpoints with the most failed logins. If we scroll down here, we can see that we can do some data visualizations that help us more easily see what that data looks like. We also have a summary of the results of the query. So this is really to help ground the analysts and understand where they are in their analysis based on this data. And we also have a feedback system, thumbs up, thumbs down, all really important. So if I click on thumbs up, it says, yeah, this is great. What did you like? This gives me the opportunity to provide feedback. And we actually use this to help train the models that go into this architecture. So being able to say, yeah, the follow-up question was good or anything like that, that feedback gets utilized. And so this is really important in any kind of working with a complex AI model or AI solution. You need that ability to generate that feedback and understand whether or not your training results or the results in production are valid or not. So the human acts as that backstop and will help improve over time. We also provide some follow-up questions around building off of what we're seeing. This is a conversation between you and the Purple AI. And so inside the context of the notebook, the AI is aware of the past queries that you've run and what the results have been. So we're going to continue to build on this now that we've got a sense of where our top machines are. What countries are the failed logins coming from? right? And this maybe helped narrow down the large volume. I think we had 85,000 failed attempts on one of those. So we'll get a little bit more information here. We're doing you can see here that it automatically does a GUIP query. I switched over to the bar chart, and very quickly we can see, all right, Finland, Lithuania, Germany should be generally non-threat actor-based countries. And of course we get to Russia, which certainly would be of some concern. We get, again, our query summary as well as our follow-up questions. So this gives me a little bit more confidence about what I'm seeing. I've got a high volume of events. I've got a significant volume of events coming from Russia. So let's continue to build on this. And now we're going to search for the accounts that are failing. So see if this can give us any information about the nature of these attacks. If it were a brute force set of attacks, I would expect to see a lot of named user accounts. Instead, I see lots of permutations of administrator or user or owner. And so right away, my cyber spidey sense is tingling. I'm thinking, all right, this looks like a password spray attempt. They're trying to cover all the bases of how we might have renamed the admin account, but still kept the admin in the name so that we can easily identify it. We can see that administrator, admin, and user are definitely the top hits. So this has absolutely gotten me concerned. I want to see a little bit more. So let's go ahead and we're seeing the counts that are failing. So let's go ahead and do. Oops. Let's take a look at the specific events where these failed. So now we're going to dig a little bit deeper, get into more of the actual Windows logs, see what those systems were doing. And when I click on these, yes, I get a general summary of this, but now I'm looking at an actual event. And inside the context, those of you that are not familiar with Sentinel-1, Sentinel-1 ties every event to what we call a storyline. Analogous to a process tree, but it's a little more involved in that. Essentially, when did the events, all of the events associated with this particular incident, this particular event of that incident, all the events going back to the birth as well as the death of all of those processes, and all the child processes included. We call that a storyline. So I can click on any one of these events, and Purple AI is going to summarize the storyline associated with that event. So I don't even have to pivot to pull all of the events. I'm actually going to get a summary. What we see here is we see a high count of incoming connections, the specific amount, a relatively low count of outgoing connections. We see a named process, Alsace, which we, of course, would expect to be involved with this. And then we see an initial login attempt originating from an RFC 1918 address. So this is also going to give us some potential concern. At this point, I'm pretty confident that we've got password spraying within the environment. We generally know the sources, based on event data like this. I could pull further data to say, all right, well, where are some of these password spraying attempts sourcing from, right? We could continue to build on this. But at this point, I think I need to notify my team. So I'm going to go ahead and request that Purple AI create that email summary. Now, it's important to track along this. We're talking, maybe 4 minutes have transpired as I've interacted and explained my interaction. If I were working as an analyst, this would take even less amount of time. But also, I am simplifying the amount of work that I have to do as an analyst to arrive at that decision point, and more importantly, be able to then communicate that back out to the rest of my team. So here's a suggested subject line. Here are some key points of evidence to support that, right? We've got specific event IDs, things like that, that I can include to say, yeah, this is what's going on, and then we can move on. And we arrived at all that. We see the last here at 13:45. If I go right back up to where I started my first one, even with explanations, that's at 13:38. So we're talking about 7 minutes with this conversation occurring, right? That's a huge force multiplier for your analysts to be able to parse through this data, understand what's happening in a meaningful way without necessarily having to have, the 25 years of expertise that I've cultivated, right? We need more people being able to fulfill these analyst roles, and they need to be able to do so with, unfortunately, limited experience. And so Purple AI can help back them up. They understand procedurally what they want to do. They may even understand conceptually what they want to do, but they may not be familiar with our query language, how data is structured, and so forth. So this gives them that leg up so that those new hires can hit the ground running. Thank you for your attention. I hope this helps you understand how Purple AI is really going to potentially change the operational workflow in your SOCs and help your team do more.
Cool. There was one thing I'd love to follow up on that demo that is coming in via some of the questions. So there was questions about is there a limit on the number of questions per notebook? And there is, and there's a good reason why. So there's a 20 question limit per notebook. And the reason for that, and you saw this maybe during the demo, is that the notebooks have contextual memory, meaning the summaries and the suggested questions build on the previous questions and responses. So maybe we'll walk you through some of the architecture for how this works. But because of the way that we're prompting the underlying LLM, obviously, as you start getting to more than 20 questions, it becomes hard to fit that all into a single prompt. So because we built this to have contextual memory and the questions and responses build on each other, there is that 20 question limit per notebook.
And a couple of other questions that came in that maybe you can clarify with this architecture slide, Eli. We got some questions about, is Purple AI an LLM? We also got a question about, do you use LLMs? And do you train LLMs? Can you try to answer those briefly with this summary slide?
Yeah. So, we have a number of design principles or tenets for Purple, and one of them is around transparency. Having built a number of AI systems over the years, I've seen the good and the bad. I've seen when you try to treat AI as a black box, it's hard to trust it. And so we actually want to be quite transparent with the way Purple works. And you'll actually see this reference architecture diagram now on our website, our public website. And so let me walk you through this architecture to give you a sense of how Purple is actually doing that work under the covers. So, starting on the left-hand side here, a customer will ask a question like, am I being targeted by a threat actor such as Fin12? And the first thing that Purple will do is it'll collect that question into what we call our agent framework. LLM agents, think about these differently as from endpoint agents. An LLM agent, it's really trained on different behaviors. And so a behavior or set of behaviors that Purple is trained on is to take a question in natural language or conversational English, and translate it to a Power Query. And so the first step is to then take that question, am I being targeted by Fin12, and semantically match it to information in our knowledge base. Knowledge base is a vector database, and it's loaded up with all sorts of different information, ranging from our documentation to our blogs, to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, to commercial threat intelligence feeds, open source threat intelligence feeds, our own threat intelligence feeds. And so when we semantically match that question to information in our knowledge base, we have information about all different types of threat actors, their TTPs and IOCs. So we will then take that information from the knowledge base, such as the list of IOCs and TTPs associated with the threat actor Fin12, and use that information from the knowledge base to smartly prompt the LLM. This is also known as prompt engineering. But we're not going straight to the LLM here. We're defending against hallucinations by trying to get this information from a declarative source, aka our knowledge base, and then using that definitive declarative information to prompt the LLM in a smart way. This is a really important concept. This overall architecture is referred to as a RAG architecture, retrieval augmented generation. The retrieval augmented piece is by building out this knowledge base that we then use to prompt the LLM, as opposed to going straight to the LLM. Going straight to the LLM is where you most often get hallucinations. So once we have prompted the LLM with information from our knowledge base, and by the way, with LLM, we built this as a fully swappable LLM architecture. We actually use a variety of models. We use some GPT-4, we use some GPT 3.5, we use some Anthropic, we'll use open source models in the future. We basically pick the model that has the best efficacy for the specific behavior that we are taking action on. So we go to the LLM and say, hey, using this information, like this list of IOCs and TTPs, please generate a Power Query. LLM is really good at that. That's essentially a code generation exercise, which LLMs are excellent at. And LLM generates that Power Query using that information. The agent framework then takes that Power Query generated by the LLM, executes it against the data lake, starts streaming back information from the data lake. We then pass that information through a statistical model. This is in-house, not the LLM. We generate summary information from that statistical model and then use that as part of the overall summary in the response that we create from that initial query. And as you saw in Shane's demo, this is all done in near real time. Like that whole process that I just described, is done typically in a second or two. So yeah, that's how it works under the covers. I think maybe another important point, which I might have missed earlier, when we go to the Singularity data lake and actually, execute the Power Query generated by Purple, that's not just on our EDR telemetry. So we actually support other types of telemetry that you can query via Purple. So this includes all of our cloud workload security telemetry. So if you deployed our sensors on your Linux or container environment, you can query that in addition to your EDR telemetry. And it includes partner logs. So we are adding more and more partner log support for Purple, but you can query things like Okta logs via Purple. We are enabling Purple to query more generally logs that are formatted in the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, OCSF, which is the native schema for any partner logs that come into the Singularity data lake. And as far as we can tell, we're the only generative AI solution out there that has OCSF support.
Thanks for the overview of the architecture as well. Knocked out some of the questions in the Q&A here. So we had a couple more in the last 5 minutes, if you can answer. This is an interesting one. So how do you see Purple AI benefiting a company that leverages existing MDR services?
That's a good one. It's a question that we've gotten oftentimes, and it could be our own vigilance service or another partner MDR service. So here's the way I think about it. Purple does not replace the need for a human. Purple makes humans more effective. So, with our own Vigilance Watch, vigilance service and partner services that have been part of the beta, they are using Purple to scale their services and make them more efficient and effective. So behind the scenes, those MDR services may be using Purple. Now, even if you're outsourcing to an MDR, which I think is in general like a great idea, oftentimes there's still a need for you to maintain a small security team. Maybe it's just even 1 or 2 people in-house. And your CIO or CISO or CTO may have a question like, hey, I just read about this new threat in a DHS CISA advisory note. Like, is this affecting us? Well, with Purple, you don't have to like round trip a question to your MDR about this. You can just go answer that question yourself by asking it in natural language in the Purple interface.
I know we have just 3 minutes left, but a few of us can stay over to answer a couple more questions if we still have a couple to go through, okay? So I'll just ask another one right away. What's the relationship between Purple and MSSPs?
Yeah, it's similar to MDRs, right? I think of MDRs as a subset, MSSPs, but we've included MSSPs as part of our beta testing. We're launching with day 1 support for MSSPs. And this also includes IR partners as well. Like we have a number of big IR partners that have become or are becoming Purple customers, and they want to use this as part of their offerings.
Interesting one. Does Purple AI take lots of disk space to operate just like Splunk?
No. Purple is a SaaS-based offering. So you don't need to deploy any hardware. You simply, I know there's lots of questions that came in about pricing and licensing. So the way that Purple works is you are charged based on the number of endpoints. That's our pricing model. We've tried to make this really simple. Like people already know how many endpoints they have. We don't want to force people to try to estimate the number of Purple queries or security compute hours, whatever that means, Microsoft Copilot. And we just want to make it really simple. Like, okay, you're licensed for 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 endpoints. Purple pricing will leverage that existing metering object. And we really don't want to like force people to like count the number of queries they're using for Purple. We just want them to use it. So we try to make pricing really simple in that sense.
And I guess one final question before we close here, Eli, because we're kind of at the forefront here with Purple AI. What do you think are the most important differentiators?
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately you can think about differentiators from a feature perspective. We have this concept of notebooks, competitors don't. Like we do next best queries, competitors don't. We do event summaries, competitors don't. We allow you to query your EDR, CDR, and partner logs, competitors don't. But moving up from like a tactical to a more strategic level, our biggest differentiator is that we know Purple works. Like we've tested this rigorously for the last 4 months with hundreds of users. We collected quantified data on the value proposition, and we've continuously improved the system. Like it's been pretty awesome to watch how rapidly progress has been made via the beta testing, and how delighted customers were at the end of the beta testing. So like the biggest differentiator for us is the efficacy of the system as a whole.
That's exciting. And we launched worldwide. So I think there might have been a question about geographical availability. So Purple AI is worldwide as of yesterday.
Yep. Yeah, you can use it in any of our data centers, Europe, US, APJ, supported in all those places.
Great. Well, I want to thank you, Eli, Alex, and Shane for joining us today and answering questions about cybersecurity, AI, and giving us a demo of Purple AI.
Cool. I think maybe we'll stay on and and try to answer some more questions that come in. Gosh, there were so many great questions. We'll try to, if folks want to stay on, we'll try to get to more of these. Yeah, and we'll also set up a, sorry, I'm being prompted by my marketing person in the shadows here. We will set up another webinar as well to continue going through some of these questions. All right, well, thanks everyone.